when it comes to interpreting narrative, be sure that you look for the following. Grammatical markers, just like we said with law, we look for grammatical markers, so also with narrative. And on the next slide, I'll give you some examples of what I'm talking about. Look for spiritual markers, like what we talked about with David and Goliath. And then be sure you're looking for application. Interwoven in narrative text, you've got passages like, "Has the Lord as much delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of divination, and insubordination is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you from being king." All right, you've got a narrative text with an unbelievably powerful spiritual application right there. And so that's where we hone in. That's where we say, all right, this is the point that everything that Saul did was something that you might say, well, there was kind of a mixture of good and bad, but the bottom line was he was zealous in some things, like getting rid of all the diviners in his kingdom, but not so zealous in others. God doesn't play games like that. God doesn't say, well, I'm thankful that you obeyed 60% of my laws, so come on in. He expects compliance in all areas. And so there's a great application for us right in the middle of that narrative. All right, talking about grammatical markers, we identified a chiasm in Genesis. Well, there are chiasms in the narrative sections as well. Take a minute and see if you can identify various elements of a chiasm in 2 Samuel 1, 19 through 27. Now remember, with the chiasm, we're looking for something that starts in one way and ends in virtually the same way, and then a point B lines it up with a point there toward the end. All right, so what do you see? What phrase do you see at the beginning and at the end?
Mighty have fallen.
How the mighty have fallen. All right, so those are the extensions of the chiasm. And then this gets a little bit trickier, but he's talking about the daughters in verse 20 and talking about the daughters in verse 24. Now, why am I grouping 25, 26, and 27 together?
How the mighty have fallen.
How the mighty have fallen. You got the same phrase there in 25 and 27. Anyway, so this is how this breaks down. What did we say about the the middle part of a chiasm.
It's the key.
Yeah, that's the main point. So, if we do it like this and add a little color to it, how the mighty have fallen, verse 19, verses 25 and 27. We talk about the daughters in verse 20 and the daughters in verse 24. We talk about Saul in verse 21 and verse 23. And so that makes the very middle there, verse 22, the center of the chiasm. And it is the most significant point. And that is, don't turn back. Don't turn empty. Now this is a type of poetry. And biblical writers like to do this. It's not that there's a ton of it that God chose to record in His Word, but they're pretty cool. Chiasms are just neat. And when you see them, you think, all right, that's a very cool way of doing a writing. So anyway, look for these kind of grammatical markers in narrative. Okay, let's move to the next genre, and that's poetry. Turn to Proverbs 2, 1 through 5, and try to analyze this exegetically. What we've learned so far, and that is we're looking for structure, we're looking for repetitive words and phrases. Oh, poetry is 3.
So, narrative is
Okay, Rob, what do you see?
It's kind of a large if thing is the passage, because there's if you, for if, and if you, and it's verse 5, then you will discern the fear of the Lord.
Okay, so how many ifs did you find?
I think 3.
Okay, how many saw that? Okay, that was a good place to start. So if we were going to kind of restructure the way this looks, my son, if you, that covers verses 1 and 2. If you covers verse 3. If you covers verse 4. Now, do you see a connection, I mean, as far as categories? Like, if you receive my words, treasure my commandments, make your ear attentive, incline your heart. Okay, you see how those might all go together, right? I'm giving you something, are you going to receive it? And then cry for discernment, lift your voice for understanding, all right, those obviously go together. Seek her as silver, search for her as hidden treasures, all right, silver, treasures, that obviously goes together. So that tells me that our division is on the right track with the 3 ifs, if, and is. And then that is followed with a then. Then you will discern the fear of the Lord and discover the knowledge of God. So there are going to be 2 positive results if you will do these 3 things with my words. Okay? Now, that's analyzing or seeing some structure in this. Now, what else did you find?
I was going to say, I noticed that it says, inclining your heart to understanding, raising your voice for understanding, and then it says, then you will understand the fear of the Lord. So I saw a connection with the word understand.
Good.
If you're lifting your heart and your voice, and you're basically searching to understand with all your heart, with everything you've got, then you're going to understand.
Do you have understand in the ESV in verse 5?
Mm-hmm.
So you've got it 3 times then. Okay, I need to check that out in Hebrew. That may be there, which would be very cool. You definitely got it in verses 2 and 3 for sure. Okay, what else? Anybody else see a list of any kind?
Yeah, if you do this will happen. The end result.
Okay.
Condition.
So did you count them up? How many this, and this are there?
Six.
It's more than 6.
8. I got 8. 7.
Yeah.
7.
I got 8.
Oh, okay.
All right, so when we look at all of the verbs, receive, treasure, make, incline, cry, lift, seek, search. So now we've got the 3 if clauses. Then we've got the 8 verbs, receive, treasure, make, incline, cry, lift, seek, search. Then you've got the direct objects, my words, commandments, wisdom, understanding, discernment, understanding again, silver, treasures. So those all are grouped together as well. Now we're just trying to find out what's there. That's all we're doing. We haven't gone into any interpretation at all. We're just saying, this is what's there. We got 3 if clauses. That was there. 3 if clauses, followed by a then. That's pretty logical, if then. Then we've got the flow of verbs. So, my sermon is, how do you see God's Word? Well, if you see it this way, and this way, and this way, then this would be the benefit. if you're willing to receive it and treasure it and make your ear attentive to it. So it's a good little 5-verse text on the importance of God's Word, the importance of listening to wise counsel.
Denny?
Yes.
In the Hebrew, the words for understanding was latabuna twice, and then it's tabim for verse 5. So it sounds like it's the same root word, but not sure if it is.
Yeah, I have to check that out. Does sound like it's coming from the same root. Okay, now, yes.
I have a question. Okay, this is probably a stupid one, but why stop at the verse that you stopped at? I mean, what made you think, 1 through whatever is going to be a good little sermon? I mean, because, like, the next, well, I'm saying, like, the next line over, there's another then. And so, like, why, you know what I'm saying? Like, what would make a preacher stop and think just these verses?
Excellent question.
Thank you.
Mediocre question.
The reason is because of the then, you've got the if, and then you have the then in verse 5. So verse 6 seems to be a summary for why should you do this? For the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. So that was a reason why, but you could easily have carried it on through, further down, but we're just trying to look at a way that we could take a block. But that was the reason why it was the if and the then.
Okay.
According to the logo software, the Hebrew word used there for discern means to understand. It's be in or something like that, according to this. I don't know if that's where you can put it.
But it's not telling us if it's the same word as understand in the early verses, is it?
It's slightly different.
It's a slightly different word.
I think it's the same root.
It is the same word?
Looks like it.
Okay. All right, work on this one for a little while and see what kind of things you see in the text.
Verse 3.
Okay, Nick. What did you see?
Didn't find anything? Dale, what'd you see?
I thought it was interesting you had, I guess you'd say 3 imperatives or 3 verbs and then a result. And then 2 and then a result. And then 1 and a result.
Okay, what are they?
Verse 5, trust. Do not lean. Acknowledge. And then the result, he will make your path straight. Verse 7, do not be wise. Fear the Lord. Verse 8, it will be healing to your body and refreshment to your bones.
Just turn away.
What about turn away from your
So you have 3-3.
So it's a 3-3-2 combo.
Yeah, sorry. It looked cool in my Bible.
Okay.
That too.
And then the last one was honor the Lord, and so your barns will be filled.
All right, how many saw the trust the Lord, fear the Lord, honor the Lord? Okay, good. We're on the right track. We're starting to see those kind of patterns. Dale, what else?
That's why I've broken it into 3 sections based on those 3 things. But the other thing I noticed is, in the King James, it's thine or thy, but it means your. 11 times.
Good.
That word is in there in just these 6 verses.
Okay, look at that. Your. So, yeah, that's something that's obviously there. And so there's an emphasis on what's going to happen to you if you do or don't do these things. Wayne?
In addition to those three, in verse 6, I saw acknowledgement. So I added that to my list of trust, fear, and honor. I added acknowledge. I don't know if that was right or not.
It's not right. But does anybody know why? No, I mean, it's a lot. At first it seems logical, but why would it not fit?
But it doesn't say the Lord.
Right. The language has to be the same. You've got trust in the Lord, fear the Lord, honor the Lord, and so in all your ways acknowledge Him isn't a part of the. Do you see the kind of the pattern?
Okay.
And that's why it wouldn't fit. See?
In the top part, the trust in the Lord, under there's two do nots, but there isn't any in the other two under fear or honor. But he says it twice. Do not lean on your own understanding and do not be wise in your own eyes.
Okay, let's work on that a little bit because we're on a really good track here with this. Now, Dale, you said something about that. Okay, so you've got trust in the Lord. How are you breaking down what we would call the subpoints underneath the trust in the Lord? Did anybody see a pattern with all three of the trust, fear, and honor phrases? Yeah, Nathan?
I think that you're referring to heart, eyes, flesh, bones, kind of this physical. That's what stood out to me. Is that what you're referring to?
No, but
Strike two.
it's there though. I mean, he's definitely hammering the body parts.
Is it the do not? Do?
Okay, that's what part of what we need to work with. Now, let me ask it this way. Trust in the Lord. All right, that's our first main point. So if I said with all your heart, what connection does that have with trusting the Lord?
What you're supposed to trust Him with.
One word.
All.
Huh?
All?
No, I mean, if
Obedience.
What's that?
Obedience.
How? That's how you trust in the Lord. Well, how do you do that? Well, you do it with all your heart. Well, do not lean on your understanding. Isn't that a how? That's another how. So, trust in the Lord. How do I do that? Well, with all my heart. How do I do that? I don't lean on my own understanding. How do I do that? In all your ways acknowledge Him. So now you've got three subpoints.
Did somebody already mention that the blessings appear to be physical as well?
That might kind of tie in with Nathan's
saying? Okay.
point about the body. All right, then notice how that follows with a why. Trust in the Lord. How do you do that? With all your heart, not leaning on your understanding, in all your ways acknowledging Him. Okay, why should I do that? Because He'll make my path straight.
So one of the things we were talking about in the book talks about man's actions and God's actions. And that seems real clear in this passage too.
Very good. Absolutely.
There you go.
All right, so if we follow the same pattern with fear the Lord, do you see a how? How do you fear the Lord according to this text? Turn away from evil. All right? Why should you do that according to this text?
It will heal your body and refresh your bones.
Yeah. 2 points. So, how do you fear the Lord? You turn away from evil. Because if you're practicing evil, you're certainly not fearing Him. But if you're turning away because you know that those who don't are going to suffer the consequences. Why? It's healing to your body and refreshment to your bones. Now, we're not running to interpretation yet. All we're doing is we're just kind of letting the text kind of flow here. Just like with that trust in the Lord, under the why, He will make your path straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. That seems not to fit. It should be, He will make your path straight, and He will, it should have followed with another He will phrase. But it didn't. Okay, well, so now I'm left to try to explain that a little bit later. Okay, with honor the Lord, do you see a how and why? How, according to this text, might you honor the Lord?
First fruits of increase.
Right, from your wealth, from the first of your produce. And then the why is what, Reggie?
So your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will overflow with new wine.
There you go. So notice how this text really does have a very cool breakdown.
Denny, do you think that the verse that says, healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones, and then he talks about prosperity in terms of having barns and vats filled with wine. The word flesh is like your stomach, your navel or whatever. Do you think there's any connection at all with, because I know wine is for the stomach, and maybe I'm just stretching that way too far. But
I don't, well, because we're talking about personal benefits, and so I think that's almost like a summary. If you are going to fear the Lord and honor the Lord, you're going to reap some very literal physical consequences. Is that kind of what you're, yeah. All right. Now, do you feel like we're stretching this at all, or when we kind of break it down, are you seeing a pattern? Pattern is there? Now, obviously, the trust in the Lord, fear the Lord, honor the Lord phrases were there. And now we're just kind of asking the question, well, what about what's underneath that? And when we analyze it, it really does seem to have some kind of a structure. So what are you going to do then with the do not be wise in your own eyes? Can you see that as more of a why? You can't? Anybody?
I kind of was putting it with the fear of the Lord. That almost is set in contrast with the idea of fearing the Lord. But I guess that's not.
That's a possibility. And it could be a translator's choice to really put that in front of do not. But it is, in the Hebrew, it is before the fear of the Lord phrase. So it does seem like it goes with the previous one. Yeah.
I think it goes with the why in trust the Lord, because when you're not leaning on your own understanding, when you're acknowledging the Lord in everything you do, it causes you to not look at things in your eyes, but to have a perspective of what God would do.
Okay. I think we're getting somewhere with that. Yeah. Yep.
I saw it kind of as a third how under trust in the Lord. how to trust in the Lord. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Put your trust in Him.
It'd actually be four, wouldn't it? With all your heart,
Yeah.
not lean on your understanding, all your ways acknowledge Him and not be wise.
Sorry, you're right.
So that would work, wouldn't it?
Yes.
It's a little out of order, but it would still fit.
He's breaking the pattern, though. I mean, that's what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
I mean,
Um,
that's. I'm sorry, but you know, if we've got a command and then we got the how and then the why, and the other two they follow the same order. If you take the first line of verse 7 out, it follows that order. So is this another one of them parenthetical statements?
It's an interpolation.
Is it the redactor?
It was redacted.
Did he say interpretation?
See, it could be. I think you're asking. See, we're asking questions because what we're seeing is it doesn't fit. On the surface, it doesn't fit. Now, if we went to what Dale was saying just a minute ago, we say, well, it kind of does because you have two do not phrases that go under how to trust in the Lord. Do not lean and do not be wise. So it really belongs as a number 4 under the how. Now remember that Hebrew is like Greek in that you could put anything anywhere. You could have the subject at the beginning, the middle, or the end. Well, Hebrew is the same way. And so the order that's here doesn't have to be, engraved in stone. We could slide, don't be wise in your own eyes, in front of, He will make your path straight. And so the only why of point number 1 is that He will make your path straight. And that'd be okay. But
What if fearing the Lord and turning away from evil is a how to not be wise in your own eyes?
well, the Lord phrase is what transitioned us to a new point. And that's why, we're not going to want to merge that with the trust in the Lord point. And then if we looked at verses 11 and 12, which are it's off the screen there, but you have a great conclusion to this. My son, do not reject the discipline of the Lord, or loathe his reproof. For whom the Lord loves, He reproves, even as a father the son, in whom He delights. So, if you trust, fear, and honor, then you're going to be receptive of whatever God brings into your life. My son, learn from the Lord. Don't reject the discipline of the Lord.
It also gives you another do not. In verse 11.
Third, that'd be the third do not, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Now, if you wanted to go all the way back, Nathan, look at verse 1. Do not forget. And then verse 3, do not let kindness. So you could actually broaden it and kind of follow the flow of the
That was a very good observation, Denny.
See the do not 5 times. Verse 1, verse 3, verse 5, verse 7, and verse 11.
Denny, were there such things as periods or sentence breaks and ends in Hebrew then? So then how is it that we can look at something like a chiasm? I mean, if the order doesn't matter, then it could all get messed up.
Well, there are still some rules. Like you're still going to have sentences. You're going to have a subject verb and a direct object, and that's going to end that sentence. And then you're going to have another subject verb and direct object. So you're not going to be able to take a chiasm and completely merge it all together because you've got statement, then a statement, and then a statement. And so where we put periods is something that's almost a rule of grammar, where even though they didn't write periods, they didn't in Greek either. The rules of grammar demand that the sentence end there and a new sentence begins.
So in verse 6 and 7 then, I've got a period at the end of verse 6, and then 7 has a new sentence. Is that subject to their interpretation, or? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah.
And there may not be a right answer, but I just...
Yeah. I'd have to look at it, but my tendency is to say, yeah, that was a translator's choice on how they were merging those together with the semicolon and or a period, and then. Now, one other point too before we leave this text: if in fact, "Do not be wise in your own eyes" belongs with the trust in the Lord, then our verse numbers didn't help us, did they?
No.
Because that actually should be a part of verse 6, and verse 7 should begin with fear of the Lord. You follow? But because verse 7 began with "do not be wise in your own eyes," that, again, that hurt us in seeing a possible flow or a breakdown here. So if we were redoing the verse numbers, then verse 5 would be trust in the Lord, and then verse 6 would still be that. Verse 7 would be fear the Lord. Verse 9 would be honor the Lord, like that, where you're following the flow that's there.
Does a poetic meter come into this at all, though?
Yeah, and there is that here. There's because it is poetry, you've got a little bit of cadence that takes place here, and rhyme as well. Yeah, Rajiv?
Does this have any significance? I see also your heart gain once more. Your heart once more 3 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your paths, your body, your bones.
See, that goes back to the point that we were making here with, because you got your heart, your understanding, your ways, your paths, your eyes, your body, your bones, your wealth, your produce. It's almost as if he's breaking it down into categories. Your heart and understanding, that has to do with intellect. Your ways, your paths, that has to do with direction. Your eyes, your body, your bone, well, those body parts. So, yeah, Rajiv, there's something there. Not necessarily with the repetition of the word heart, although that's certainly something you'd want to look at.
Going back to Donnie's question, would Hebrew writers ever intentionally break a cadence to make an emphasis? Would they be going into cadence and then all of a sudden intentionally stop that cadence as if to draw attention to that point? Because my question would then be, would they be drawing attention to be not wise in your own eyes intentionally?
Right. They would do that. As a matter of fact, when the Psalms and you come across Selah, that's probably what a Selah is. It's an abrupt, unexpected stop. And then what our mind automatically does is, and then you replay in your mind the very last thing that was said, and that makes it just almost scream out at you because the silence in your mind is repeating the last thing that actually was said.
So if he's doing that here, would the be not wise in your own eyes be a focal point of what he's trying to say? Possibly.
Possibly.
But probably not based off of just everything else in this.
Yeah. I think the fact that we're identifying the trust, fear, honor pattern, that still seems to be the best part of this.
Is it possible that maybe the he shall direct thy paths and be not wide in thine own eyes is reversed maybe for the sake of rhyme or for the sake of meter, since this is poetry? And maybe that's why it's not in order?
I have to look at that. That's a good question. Okay, other comments, questions about that?
How many verbs occur in that? Like that are like command type verbs?
Let me see.
Imperatives.
Well, one. I want to say there's 7.
Okay, there's our 3 main ones, and then the acknowledge, the turn away, and then the 2 in the negative fashion.
Well, do not lean, that's 1. Acknowledge is 1. Do not be wise.
Turn away.
Fear and turn, yeah. Michael Haidt, he took this class and decided one Sunday morning that he was going to preach this text, exegetically, and he did an awesome job. It was really good.
Okay, Denny, I have another question.
I told her not to ask.
I'm getting hung up on this, and I don't know why, but when I'm looking at the chapter, and I'm seeing in verse 1, he's talking about, my son, do not forget my teaching. And then we see that again, in verse 11, like, my son, and he's talking about that. It seems to me like this is like a little snippet in a bigger story, if you will. So how can we pull that little bit out and say, do a Sunday morning sermon on it? Not that I'm saying I'm going to preach it, but I'm just saying, like, how can we? But I'm saying, like, how can we pull that out? Like, aren't we just pulling it out of context and not using what it was meant to be between these other two? Or am I missing something completely?
No, that's a fair question. The only reason why we're focusing on 5 through 9 was because of the repetition of the Lord phrases. Now, it would be, if you want to say, well, I need more text, I want to go with a broader context, then really you would start with verse 1 and probably go down through verse 12.
Okay, but what you're saying is if you have enough information, then you don't have to do that.
If you mark keywords and key phrases, and then you're looking through the letter, through this one, you'd notice like that those 3 came close together. So you might decide then, well, since those are so close together, I would use that, since those phrases are so close together, I'll just use that section of verses.
Okay.
That's why.
Yeah, but let's say that I wanted to expand. If I wanted to expand, then that would really be 3 subpoints of a main point. You follow?
Yes.
So, it's still getting out of the text what's there. And that's really all we're looking at. Other questions, comments?
So are we still continuing underneath the narrative, the genre of poetry? Is that what we're looking at still?
Yeah, still looking at poetry. See if you can find a chiasm in Psalm 70.
Poetry.
Okay, what did you find, Jake? What did you find that are the outer parts of the chiasm?
Well, you have in the beginning, you have, "Oh God, hasten, deliver me," and then again in the 5, you have, "Hasten to me, O God."
Okay, so what words are you linking together?
Basically, the "Oh God, hasten to me" in that sense.
Okay, oh God, hasten, deliver. One other word. See a fourth word that links?
Help.
Help. Okay, so you've got those 4 words. All right, then as we're moving into the chiasm, what verses go together? What's that, Lynn? Did you say? What would you say, Lynn? Do you got what 2 verses go together? You got 1 and 5. The logic would say yeah, 2 and 4. But do you see a parallel between 2 and 4?
Yeah.
What do you see, Dan?
He's put those to shame who seek his life, and let everybody who seeks your life, or who seeks you, be glad and rejoice.
That's it. So you got the let those twice in verse 2, and then let all, and then let those in verse 4. So
Let those in verse 3 too.
which ends up being the middle.
The middle.
But yeah, you know, it seems like it's a chiasm. It has a flow to it. And if that's the case, then verse 3 would be sort of the emphasis that's here. Let those be turned back because of their shame who say, aha, aha. Well, I'm going to choose to be with the Lord. And if others are going to reject him, then they're going to have to reap the consequences of that choice. Chiasms are there are some that see the entire book of the Song of Solomon as one massive chiasm. And I've studied that, I've looked at it, and sometimes I think I'm seeing it, and then other times I'm not so sure. You can get to where you're seeing a chiasm under every rock. You know, behind every tree is another chiasm. Be careful about that. There are not that many chiasms, but there are certainly some that are out there. Okay? What grammatical markers do you see in Ecclesiastes 3:16 through 22? Okay, anybody see any structure?
I have seen, and I said to myself. In verse 16 and verse 22, he says, I have seen. And verse 17 and 18, it says, I said to myself.
Yeah, you see that? So you've got, I have seen, I said, I have seen. So he seems like he's working us through basically 4 I statements. What he has seen, and what he says in response to what he has seen. Now again, you said, why did we start at verse 16? Because that's the beginning of the I have statement. And so saying, well, that seems like that's maybe the beginning of a section. Obviously, it's a greater context, but if you wanted to break it down with the I have seen, I said, I have seen.
So when you have it set up like this, and there's not a real clear center to the chiasmus, are the main points then the 2 closest points? Does that make sense?
No, this isn't a chiasm.
Oh, I thought you were saying it was. Okay.
No, this isn't. It doesn't.
Okay.
I'm starting to think everything's a chiasm.
I was looking for what you were saying.
I know that's what he said. Every passage you
Oh, it's another chiasm. Good. This guy's pulling chiasms out of the thin air.
All right, let's move to prophecy.
Never worry about my
Never you worry about my son.
All right, look at Isaiah 30.
Danny?
Yes.
When exactly did we switch to poetry?
Let me see.
Yesterday?
Yeah.
Yesterday or yesterday?
Was the start.
We switched to poetry when we did Proverbs 2, 1 through 5. Okay, so now we're genre number 4. We're not going to do history, so there's another genre in there that we're not going to spend time, that sort of goes with narrative. All right, so take a look at Isaiah 30, 27 through 33, and see what you, tell me what you see. Jack, you coming up with anything?
I saw the whole idea of the Lord in there, 4 times. Name of the Lord, mountain of the Lord, voice of the Lord, and breath of the Lord.
Good. How many got that? All right. See, that's seeing flow. We got 4 points there. And so you could say this is a mini section on studying the Lord. Nature, character of the Lord. His name, His mountain, His voice, and His breath. All right? Who saw something else? Regine?
It's always anger, His smoke, His lips, His tongue, His breath.
Lips, tongue, breath. How many did you come up with? Voice?
So His anger, 1. His smoke, His lips, His tongue, His breath, 5.
Okay. 7
7
of those. Now, those would be subdivided because the of the Lord phrase gives you more of a pattern than, so you're talking about the name, mountain, voice, and breath, but then you've got these other, the lips, the tongue, the anger, and things like that. Okay? Yeah.
I don't know if it's just because we're looking for them now, but I think I see a chiasm.
Tell me your chiasm.
Well, in verse 27, it talks about his burning anger, and verse 28 of breath, and that kind of goes along with 33, where it talks about fire and the breath of the Lord. And then in verse 29, you have instruments of music, and also in verse 32, you have tambourines and harps, so you have instruments of music. And then in verses 30 and 31, you have the idea that the Assyrians are being beaten down in both those verses.
Anybody else see that?
We weren't looking for a chiasm.
Yeah, we were. It just so happens that it's there. Yeah, I kind of steered you away from chiasm, but Dale he refused to be budged. But
I thought I saw it.
Yeah, but there is a chiasm there. But also, what Jack saw was there as well. And I'm not saying that there's a one way or a right and that's a wrong, but this is just different ways that this text can be analyzed. You could look at it as a chiasm, or you could look at it following the name of the Lord phraseology, or you could do what Rajiv did with the 7, what could we name those? Descriptions of the Lord.
I was going to say, I think I saw a chiasm in Matthew chapter 1. Everybody turn over there real quickly. It's a joke. Genealogy.
Sorry, Danny.
Chiasm and genealogy.
As cool as chiasms are, I mean, I could just see trying to teach people about these, their eyes just glossing over. So how, I mean, besides, okay, it's kind of cool, would you just point out maybe the way it's structured, we could see the one main point in the middle, or would you even bother with it?
Yeah, I typically will, I'll illustrate something like I'm illustrating now, but maybe not make a big deal of it. But because you're right, they do have a tendency to kind of gloss over and say it's a little bit too technical for me. Plus, I've never heard the word chiasm, and so that kind of scares me. And so it kind of maybe depends on your congregation if they're like a little bit more deeper things. Donnie, did you ever talk about chiasms in any of your church work? Not in English?
A lot in Spanish.
Not in Spanish.
So no.
Okay, some other points about prophecy before we leave this is threads or themes that you're going to see in prophetic literature. Turn to the book of Daniel. you have an emphasis, really a kind of a twofold emphasis in this book, which we know is an emphasis because of keywords, repetition of words and phrases. And then you've got those particular words and phrases that lead us to kind of some key verses. This is what I mean. If you look at 1:4, we're talking about the youths that are showing intelligence in every branch of wisdom, endowed with understanding and discerning knowledge. Then you look at verse 17. As for these 4 youths, God gave them knowledge and intelligence in every branch of literature and wisdom. Now, with that as a backdrop, notice how the word know or known predominates the text in the following chapters. Chapter 2, verse 5, if you do not make known to me the dream. Verse 9, that if you do not make the dream known. And then you have that section in 20 through 23 where in verse 22, he knows what is in the darkness. And then verse 23, the last part, even now thou hast made known to me what we requested of thee, for thou hast made known to us the king's matter. All right, so what God does is he is a revealer. He is a revealer of information. And so the book of Daniel is a book in which God is revealing. He's making known. Now, part of what he's making known is that it is he who sets up kingdoms and removes kingdoms. Because, verse 20, wisdom and power belong to him. All right, then you drop down to verse 25. It says, last part, among the exiles from Judah who can make the interpretation known to the king. Verse 26, Belteshazzar says, the king says to Daniel, are you able to make known to me the dream? Verse 28, however, there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to the king what will take place in the latter days. Verse 29, he has made known. Verse 30, he made the interpretation known. Verse 45, the great God is made known to the king. So anyway, we don't need to work our way all the way through the book of Daniel, but hopefully you see the point. There's something about revelation. There's something about the great God who is making known these things. And part of what he's making known is that God sets up kings and kingdoms and removes kings and kingdoms. As a matter of fact, that particular idea is going to be repeated several times within the book. So we know it's got to be significant because we keep coming around to the fact that God does this, like in 4:17. In order that the living may know that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind, he bestows it on whom he wishes and sets over it the lowliest of men. And then verse 25, last part. Until you recognize that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind and bestows on it whomever he wishes. Verse 26. And in that it was commanded to leave the stump with its roots of the tree, your kingdom will be assured to you after you recognize that it is heaven that rules. Verse 32 says virtually the same thing. So as we're going through this text, well, jump over to chapter 5. Verse 18. O King, the Most High granted sovereignty, grandeur, glory, and majesty to King Nebuchadnezzar your father, And because of the grandeur which he bestows on him, all the peoples, nations, and men of every language feared and trembled before him. Whomever he wished he killed, whomever he wished he spared alive, whomever he wished he elevated, whomever he wished he humbled. Verse 21, he also was driven away from mankind, and his heart was made like that of the beast, and his dwelling place was with the wild donkeys, and he was given grass to eat, like cattle. His body was drenched with the dew of heaven, until he recognized that the Most High God is ruler over the realm of mankind. He sets over it whomever he wishes. Okay, so following that particular thread, now jump over to some of these visions. In chapter 7. Now here's terminology that if you didn't get that particular point, God is in control, God's setting up, God's removing, then you're not going to see this. But now that we've seen that, you look at chapter 7 through different perspective. What I mean is this. Verse 4. The first was like a lion, and he had the wings of an eagle. And I kept looking until its wings were plucked. Who did that? Well, what did the first 5 chapters say? God does this. Its wings were plucked, and it was lifted up from the ground. Who did that? And made to stand on 2 feet like a man. Who did that? And a mind also was given to it. Who did that? God. God is active. And as we talk about this first beast, talking about Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar, God is the one that set it on its feet, established it as a kingdom. All right? Then, verse 5, we move to the Medo-Persian Empire. And it was raised up on one side, and 3 ribs were in its mouth between its teeth. And thus they said to it, Arise, devour much meat. Somebody is given directives to the Medo-Persian Empire telling it what to do. Then you look at verse 6. Now we move to the Grecian Empire. After this I kept looking, and behold, another one like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had its 4 heads. And what does your Bible say? Dominion was given to it. Well, who gave dominion to the Grecian Empire? God did. He sets up kings. He sets up kingdoms. He has removed Babylon, put in place Medo-Persia. He moved Medo-Persia out of the way, set in place Greece. This is the theme that is being seen from here.
They, in verse 5, bring Elohim.
Think so? Now, some would say that because Michael and all them that we read about in chapter 10 are involved in this, that they might have been included in the they.
What did he ask? Sorry.
Who the they is in verse 5, chapter 7, verse 5. In the vision in chapter 8, you've got more of the same. Matter of fact, you look at this idea of a time. Look at chapter 8, verse 17. I understand that the vision pertains to the time of the end. And then verse 19. Let you know, there's one of our key words, will occur at the final period of indignation, for it pertains to the appointed time of the end. And then verse 26, last part, for it pertains to many days in the future. So God is in control of all of this that's happening. Now, those of you that were in Bible class yesterday, studied through chapters 11 and 12 of Daniel, and this is what I think was missed when these chapters were taught. Look at chapter 11. Now we know that chapter 11 is walking us through the intertestamental period. God is telling his people what's going to happen in that intertestamental period, basically from Artaxerxes all the way through the Roman Empire. But that's not really the point. The point is this. Verse 4, as soon as he has arisen, his kingdom will be broken. Well, who's going to break his kingdom? God is. Verse 4, last part. For his sovereignty will be uprooted and given to others besides him. Then in verse 6, the middle part, it says, she will not retain her position of power. Verse 11, last part. Then the latter will raise a great multitude, but that multitude will be given into the hand of the former. Verse 12, last part. Yet he will not prevail. Verse 14, last part. But they will fall down. Verse 16. But he comes against him, he will do as he pleases, and no one will be able to withstand him, for he will also stay for a time in the beautiful land. Verse 19, last part. But he will stumble and fall and be found no more. Verse 20, last part. Yet within a few days he will be shattered. And then verse 24, last part. He will devise his schemes against strongholds, but only for a time. Verse 25, last part. He will have an extremely large and mighty army for war, but he will not stand. Verse 27, for the end is still to come at the appointed time. Verse 29, at the appointed time. Verse 35, until the end time, because it is still to come at the appointed time. Verse 36, last part, that which is decreed will be done. Verse 40, and at the end time, the king of the south will collide with him. Verse 45, last part, yet he will come to an end, and no one will help him. So when you see, and I don't know how many I just gave you, but it was like 25 or 26 illustrations of there's another force going on here. This is going to happen. He's going to become great. He won't last. He'll be removed. At the appointed time, this is what's going to happen. It's all developing the theme that was begun all the way in the early chapters of Daniel about the power and the sovereignty of God. He is in control. Now, do you understand that? Do you get that? And if you do, then this phrase all of a sudden makes more sense. Look at verse 33, chapter 11, verse 33. And those who have insight. Verse 35. And some of those who have insight. Then chapter 12, verse 3. And those who have insight. And then verse 10, last part. Those who have insight will understand. So what are you going to understand?
God's behind it all.
God's behind it all. He is totally in control. And God's people are not going to stress about this and be worried about that because God's in control. So that's what you have insight. It's not meaning that you understand all the nuances and the particulars of what was going to happen through history. but that you get the big picture. You got that. That's what you got inside. And God's people understand. And so we're able to just go through life with a peace and a confidence and assurance. God's got it all worked out. That's why God's saying 1225 days is all going to happen. Well, I don't know what that means. God does. And He knows when that particular time is going to end and something else is going to begin. Pretty cool. Pretty cool as you're working through Daniel. But see, to me, the spiritual point was lost in the way that we're working through the text. Where you can get lost in that part and really fail to see, look at all the times that whoever these people are referring to, and I think we pretty much have it all figured out as to who, which part's Antiochus and which part is talking about somebody else. But it's all under the power and the control of God. And that's the spiritual lesson that's found in this prophetic literature. Not unusual. Daniel doesn't stand alone in that. Ezekiel's the same way. Isaiah, Jeremiah, all the minor prophets, same way. Just got to look for those spiritual threads that run through these books. Okay, a good time to take a break, and so we'll have...
I've got good news and I've got bad news. The bad news is I'm going to talk about the midterm exam, which will be 8 a.m. Thursday morning. The good news is, after we finish talking about this, we're done for the day.
Amen.
Nice.
So,
One study.
I mean,
I should have told you that before break, so you could have left.
Are you serious or are you pulling our legs?
You want to go ahead and slip out?
Yeah. So Thursday, when should we show up?
You should show up at
After lunch.
after lunch. So that would be 12:45, right?
Sweet. Shut the door.
We'll have to test in the morning, and then we'll...
That's it. I think you should make our boys take
Then we'll have some as soon as I go from this, right in. Yeah. Okay, this won't take long, but a couple of points by way of clarification on the review sheet. I'm asking for the 6 gaps, but the heading that I had on over the PowerPoint was challenges. So we're done with the same thing, challenges or gaps. And also, we've gone through 11 steps, not 9.
So do we really need to know 9 of them then? We just...
I'd go ahead and learn 11. And I think Nathan was that, or Dustin, was that all on the review sheet?
Yeah, that was the only one that everything else was pretty clear.
Okay. Bring your colored pencils. If you forget, you'll have to borrow them from Jess and Nathan and Dustin, Chris.
And we do charge, just to let you guys know.
Thank you. bring your literal physical Bibles. You'll not be allowed to use your computer, so don't even set it up. And then I am going to, in addition to the questions, I'll have you look at some Old Testament texts, and pretty much what we have done in today's class will be what I want you to do on the test, where you're marking, you're writing down, very similar to the sheets that you've been turning in too. So I'm basically going to give you a text like this, and I want you to do on that what you did with, what is this one? This is John 1, but some Old Testament text. So be prepared to do that. That's why you'll need the colored pencils and all that. Okay, that's all of that. Okay, any questions about the test?
Are you going to ask us to outline a passage?
Yeah. When I give you a passage, part of what I'm going to want you to do is to outline. So, yeah. Somebody else? Okay. We are dismissed then, and see you Thursday morning.
Amen. Love you, Brother Denny.
No, that
Did you want to
did
go?
did you say something about that before I walked in? Where it is?
It's
In the syllabus.